Carolyn Myss is a blessing to us all. Simply, her teachings will transform your life and you will never ever be the same. Carolyn Myss is a pioneer in energy medicine and human consciousness. She is a medical intuitive, one who sees illness in the body through intuitive means. She is an international lecturer and best-selling author and has produced such works as Energy and Anatomy, Anatomy of the Spirit, and Why People Can't Heal and How They Can, and Spiritual Madness. She has co-authored the book, The Creation of Health, with Dr. Norman Shealy on the spiritual causes of illness. Steering us away from New Age fantasies and seductions, Carolyn gives us a practical approach to heal physical illness and our life issues. But much more than this, Carolyn Myss is a role model, someone who has lived the truth of her own teachings, and someone who has survived her own dark nights. Carolyn, welcome.
Thank you, Audrey.
I'm so grateful to have you here. I know that everyone in LA is like clamoring for you.
Well, I don't know about that, but yeah, thank you.
I'd like to talk about how we live and how we can live better. But I'd like to start off with a simple question. Carolyn, why are we here?
That's simple? Oh,
well, you know, just why, what is the aim of all this? I mean, what is the consciousness journey? I mean, what's it all for?
Well, I'm going to make something up because I'm not sure that anybody can give, you know, who would truly know the answer to that question. And I can tell you this, if they would, they wouldn't be living on this planet. But I think that if, from my perception, we're obviously here to learn, but what are we here to learn, okay? And to whom does it matter? So the next logical question, and I pursued these types of dialogues, if you will, when I was studying theology, because I have a background in theology, one of my graduate degrees. And I, from that perception, I believe this to be true, that the journey here is one in which we learn the power of the human spirit. How do we learn that? We learn that through its relationship to matter. Well, what does that mean? If I were an angel educating souls before they would incarnate, I'd say, here, this is your task. You have to learn how to make wise investments into matter with your spirit, because your investments pay a dividend. And the wise soul learns to acquire golden dividends. And if you make unwise investments, you're going to end up in energetic debt. And eventually, you're going to have to borrow money to pay off your debts. Now, you're going to get money from two places. You're going to take it from the energy fields of somebody else, which you can do through complaining or other ways of becoming parasitical, or you can borrow energy, take it from your life cell tissue, in which case you drain your physical body of the energy it preciously needs to keep itself alive.
Is this what you mean by energy medicine, and that we plug into certain things that we're attached to? Right.
Well, you know, energy medicine is very much the practice of helping people assess where'd you invest your energy and how much of it have you going in that direction. I mean, what I tell my students is that imagine that you have $100 worth of energetic capital a day. All right? Now, where are you going to invest it? And by the time people start thinking about, and I'll say to them, how much of your capital do you invest in your memories that aren't so pleasant, into the issues that happened in your life that you're still angry about, and unresolved issues, and in anger at certain people, and feelings that you've been betrayed and you simply got to get even with them, and into the would-have, should-have, could-haves of your life. How much money have you invested in that, and continue to invest in that? And believe it or not, Audrey, by the time they get done with their day, they have $5 left in their wallet to run their biology, their creativity, their relationships, and all of these things cost high voltage energetic dollars, okay? Creativity is expensive. And what I tell people is, you can have all the creative ideas you want, because ideas in and of themselves don't cost anything. But if you wanted to actually make an idea happen, you got to come up with some energetic capital. Why? Because you need to heighten the power of your law of magnetic attraction. You need to buy more physics, okay? You need to be able to have your cause and effect work with a larger degree of landmass, right? Because your pool, you need a different level of geography and choreography to work with you, and that's expensive. So unless you have your energy in present time, you will not be able to acquire the kind of energetic budget that you need.
But how do you really unplug? I mean, let's just say, for example, I was told as a child, oh, you'll never make it. Or, you know, and it's, like you say in your book, could be a 30-second thing you're living with your whole life. How do you really do it? I mean, it sounds so easy.
Yeah, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you know, what doesn't help is that, and this is what I tried to point out in my book, is why people find it so difficult to heal. It's not that it's difficult healing, quite frankly. We have to be careful here because we got to recognize right off the bat that healing does not and should never be measured by the return of health to the physical body. Okay?
It's never about the goal, you're saying, ever.
Well, it's never even about the repair of the physical body. Because the reality is, Audrey, we're all going to die. So if you measure health and healing by whether or not the body's recovered, you're missing the mark. Because I know people who have gone on into their next life far more healed than people who remain here and try desperately. I mean, the journey of healing is a matter of balancing your consciousness. If it repairs your body, fine. But oftentimes, it's simply your time to go home, as they say. That doesn't mean you failed. You could have succeeded in that you settled all your unfinished business with people. You've forgiven everybody you needed to forgive. I don't consider that a failure. Okay?
Right.
Not by any means. But what we were talking about earlier is what makes healing in many ways such a challenge is because we've learned in these last 30, 40 years, because of the development of becoming a psychological and a spiritually open culture, which we never were before,
True.
is that we now have access to a vocabulary that we've never used before. We suddenly talk about a wound dealing with our wounded child. And I mean, just go ahead and imagine your father saying that to your mother. I've got to go take the afternoon off so I can work through my wounded child. Yes. Can you imagine anything more ridiculous in the whole of your life on this planet? So the thing is, we're learning to do different kinds of internal processes, and those kinds of, that kind of permission has given us a new vocabulary, which I refer to as a language of intimacy, the new language of intimacy, so that when you meet somebody, you can immediately go to your inner territory without any kind of detour. We don't have to wait 25 years now to tell somebody we have a heartache. In most cases, it takes 25 seconds after you first meet them. And then the next thing you know, the other person says, you have a heartache? I have one. How big is yours? And here it starts.
The woundology.
The woundology begins, and we end up being wound mates. And in becoming that, we start supporting each other.
Yeah.
So if you suddenly call up and say, Carolyn, I'm having a wound flashback, it's understood that I'm going to leave whatever I'm doing and come to wherever you are and give you all the support I can, or vice versa.
Right.
Now, that, Audrey, is a lot of control to have with somebody. Health doesn't give you that kind of control. If I was healthy and you were healthy and I called you up and said, Audrey, you want to go out to the movies tonight, or are you doing anything? You want to go shopping? It gives you the right to say no if you're healthy, because you don't have that kind of dependency. People fear becoming independent of each other.
And afraid they'll be alone.
Precisely, because one of the myths that I tackle in there is the fact that we have not created a viable profile of what the healthy person should look like. Instead, we have a mythic person. We have somebody who's fully healed, who will never, ever again have any emotional scar tissue or any emotional vulnerability. And if he or she does, they wouldn't admit it, and they have to settle it and resolve it alone. That they'll never have, again, another weakness, that they'll always have a fully empowered physical body, that their mind and heart will always be totally managed, so that everybody else next to them will look like a failure. Now, would you want to be that person? I wouldn't. And so why would anybody, given if that's the goal, want to heal?
Very true.
Do you see? I mean, what we would do is sabotage ourselves, because what we've done is we've created a goal that sounds good on paper, but emotionally feels like a nightmare.
So that's why some people heal and others don't.
I think some people heal because they don't have that fear that they're going to give up the life being unhealthy has given them. Okay? I've also seen, you know, in certain categories, I mean, we have to acknowledge and respect that there are thousands of people, maybe millions, certainly millions, who are genuinely trying to heal. What I'm pointing out is there a whole nother category who are not. I'm not saying everybody doesn't. I'm saying we have to recognize that that belief that we all want to heal is not true across the board.
Right. We have so many misperceptions
numerous.
About God, and even what the journey is all about. And you say God is chaos. Yeah, you know, it's paradox. It's the unanswered
paradox,
prayer.
Absolutely.
I think that concept to me has been the most life-transforming. Could you explain it?
Sure. I think what humankind has done is decided, they use this formula, that you take all the good things about us. Like, if we're just, God is 10 times as just. And if we're loving, God is 20 times as loving. Okay, but God is always like us. That's nonsense, because then we think if God reasons like a human being and follows our school of justice. Oh yeah? Well, if we are enemies, but you're Christian and I'm Christian, or you're Jewish and I'm Jewish, which side is God's reason on? Okay?
Yeah.
The divine is not humanly reasonable. That's what separates us. The journey here is to not remain hooked into your human reasoning skills, because life is not a reasonable experience. It's a mystery. So that you finally realize that the gods talk to us in paradox. And that's where all the mythic stories from the scripture come in, i.e. a mustard seed can move a mountain. To the logical, reasonable mind that says, oh really? Let me see you do that. But if you understood it symbolically, you realize that genuine faith can shift anything in the physical world, and it can. So that the way the gods work is they always send in great power in a very humble way. And because human beings always look for great power in a very big way.
Yes.
We always do this, just like you think that when you look for guidance, you'll expect a vision when in fact guidance will come in the smallest moment instead of the greatest vision. That's the language of the gods.